Subcommittee on the National Security is convening to examine the issue of veteran and active duty military suicides. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes for an opening statement. Today's hearing will mark a first step in our subcommittee investigation to examine the devastating suicide crisis affecting our nation's veterans and active duty military members. Our oversight of this critical issue is founded in a genuine, bipartisan commitment to ensure that America's sons and daughters who have served or are serving in the military receive timely access to health care and support services that reflect the noble spirit of their sacrifice on behalf of the American people. At the outset, I'd like to commend Ranking Member Heiss of Georgia, my ranking member, and Representative Mark Green of Tennessee for their leadership and their good work in this area. With the return of over 2.7 million veterans from Operation Iraqi Freedom, Operating Enduring Freedom in Afghanistan, and other recent, oftentimes multiple war zone deployments, America's solemn responsibility to care for our returning heroes is a more important mission than ever. Regrettably, the suicide crisis that has endured and markedly increased in our veteran community over the past decade stands as a stark reminder that we must redouble our efforts to address continued gaps in veterans' care. Last week witnessed the 7th veteran suicide committed at a VA facility in 2019 when a veteran took his own life outside the Lewis Stokes Cleveland VA Medical Center in Ohio. While the Department of Veteran Affairs has been able to successfully intervene in over 90% of the 260 veteran suicide attempts committed on VA properties since 2017, at least 25 veterans have taken their lives in this manner over the past 18 months. Moreover, this national emergency extends far beyond these tragic cases at the VA. 99.6% of veteran suicides are not committed at a VA facility. According to the most recent VA National Suicide Data Report, an average of 6,000 veteran suicides occurred annually between 2008 and 2016. Over the course of a decade, the veteran suicide rate increased from 23.9 per 100,000 in 2005 to over 30 per 100,000 people in 2016. The suicide rate for our youngest veterans, those between the ages of 18 and 34, has risen dramatically by nearly 80% over the same time period. Overall, agency statistics reveal that the suicide rate within the veteran community is 1.5 times as great as that for a non-veteran population, when those are adjusted for age and gender. The scope of this crisis has also reached the active duty servicemen and women who are currently enlisted and deployed in defense of our country. According to the nonpartisan RAND Corporation, the suicide rate among all active duty members of the United States Armed Forces increased from 16.3 per 100,000 to over 20 per 100,000 between 2008 and 2016. With nearly 140 reported suicides last year, active duty suicides in the U.S. Army reached their highest levels in the last 6 years. Similarly, the number of confirmed and suspected active duty suicides in the U.S. Marine Corps and U.S. Navy stand at their highest reported levels in a decade. Within U.S. Special Ops Forces, the occurrence of 22 active duty suicides in 2018 marked triple the number from the previous year. Since fiscal year 2013, Congress has appropriated nearly $1 billion to the VA towards its 24-hour Veterans Crisis Line and other key suicide prevention outreach programs. An additional $120 million has been appropriated to the Department of Defense for its Defense Suicide Prevention Office, the lead agency component on suicide prevention, policy, training, and programs for active duty personnel. While we must continue to ensure that these agencies receive the necessary funding to tackle the prevalence of military suicides head-on, sustained congressional oversight of existing deficiencies will prove equally essential to maximizing the effectiveness of suicide prevention programs. It will also augment the work of the Suicide Prevention Task Force established by the President via executive order earlier this year. Despite the best efforts of the dedicated professionals at the VA and the Department of Defense, who work tirelessly to prevent military suicides, serious gaps remain that require our immediate attention. As reported by the Independent Government Accountability Office last year, media outreach activities conducted by the VA Health Administration to raise awareness among veterans and their families about available crisis resources have declined significantly due to leadership turnover and office reorganization since 2017. These same factors resulted in the agency's inability to utilize a majority of its allocated $6.2 million paid media budget for the fiscal year 2018 for suicide prevention outreach. At the Department of Defense, a 2015 audit conducted by the agency's Inspector General determined that leadership and organizational challenges resulted in the absence of a unified, and this is a quote, unified and coordinated effort to address suicide prevention across the DoD, close quote. So for that reason, I remain concerned that 4 out of 9 leadership positions in the office that oversees the Defense Suicide Prevention Office are currently filled by officials that are serving in either a temporary capacity or acting capacity. We must also begin to build upon legislation, including the Clay Hunt Suicide Prevention for American Veterans Act of 2015, that Congress enacted to address the increasing suicide rate among our veterans and active duty personnel. In the 116th Congress, I'm proud to co-sponsor H.R. 2340, the Fight Veteran Suicide Act, introduced by Representative Max Rose of New York. This bipartisan legislation would require the VA to submit timely reports to Congress regarding veteran suicide incidents on VA campuses in order to provide us with real-time data on the full scope of this crisis. I'm also very proud to co-sponsor H.R. 2333, the Support for Suicide Prevention Coordinators Act, introduced by Representative Anthony Brindisi of New York. And this bipartisan bill would require the Government Accountability Office to assess the workload and vacancy rates of suicide prevention coordinators at the VA. As acknowledged by the VA in its national strategy for preventing suicides among veterans, the agency by itself cannot adequately confront this issue. I strongly agree. Our ability to address the unique challenges facing the brave men and women who serve in the United States Armed Forces will be greatly dependent on maximum and sustained collaboration with the executive branch, our veteran service organizations, government watchdog entities, and other stakeholders. America's dedicated veterans and active duty service members deserve no less. Finally, I'd like to say the following to the men and women of our nation's armed services and those who have retired from military service. We continue to stand with you. You have fought and sacrificed for your country, and now it is our job in Congress to fight for you. So if you or someone you know is thinking about suicide, or if you're worried about a friend or a loved one, or would like emotional support, the Suicide Prevention Lifeline Network is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. To speak with a trained crisis worker, please call 1-800-273-8255, 1-800-273-8255, or text 838-255. I now